Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Charlotte Roberts, and it is a privilege to be here with you on behalf of UWorld Roger CPA Review as we discuss a little more information about the upcoming July 1st CPA exam changes, but more importantly, how to better understand and interpret those changes through the AICPA blueprints. Before we get started today, a little background on UWorld Roger CPA Review. UWorld has had the privilege of helping over 2 million students prepare and pass their high-stakes exams. So think about some of the most professional and intense exams and certifications students are taking, everything from medical, nursing, pharmacy, college prep such as ACT and SAT, bar review, CFA, and near and dear to us, of course, the CPA exam. Through that all, our students have remained at the heart of everything that we do, and we're incredibly proud at UWorld Roger CPA Review of our proven 91% CPA exam pass rate. That's really attributed to two things which you'll see today. One is our high quality content, both within our lectures and our questions and answers, but then also our suite of signature technology, including, as you can see here, our SmartPath predictive technology. So if you're unfamiliar with SmartPath is our data-driven path to help our students pass the CPA exam 3 times faster. But I'll show a little bit more of that later today. As you can see here, I truly feel that I am an ambassador on behalf of this group that you see here today. This is our subject matter expert team, our content team of academics, CPAs, and professionals, all dedicated to your success, writing our questions and our answers throughout our product. So it is an absolute privilege today to have Dave Henderson here as one of our content writers. So I'm going to go and turn it over to you, Dave, for a little bit of an introduction.
Well, thank you, Charlotte, so much for that introduction. My name is Dave Henderson. I'm an associate professor of accounting at the University of Mary Washington. I'm also the director for the Center for Business Research here at UMW. At UMW, I teach principles of accounting. I teach accounting for decision making and control. I teach accounting information systems, and I also teach data analytics for accounting. I also do research on technology adoption by accountants, and I recently presented a paper discovering the enablers and inhibitors to data analytics software technology by accountants at the AAA IS section meeting, and I'm very happy to be here to discuss the upcoming changes to the CPA exam.
Yes, and we are definitely in for a treat, Dave, because I've had a preview of some of what you're going to share, and given all of the changes, especially to surrounding data on the CPA exam, you are our expert, and so we're going to learn a lot today. I know that. So it's much of what your efforts and the content team put together with, as I mentioned, our signature technology that has really led us here at UWorld to be an award winner in education technology. And so there's a few here that our audience can see. Especially proud of that Elijah Watt-Sells Award. For those that aren't very familiar with the Elijah Watt-Sells Award, that is an award given to candidates every year with the highest CPA exam score. And so exceptionally proud of that one because we're having more students directly attribute their success and receiving that award to the UWorld Roger CPA Review course. Lastly, it is really this recognition of being a leader in education technology that has led to a number of successful partnerships with the country's top public accounting firms. And so that includes firms such as Deloitte, Crowe, Plant Moran, and Mazars, to name a few, as really all large public accounting firms partner with UWorld Roger CPA in order to provide our course for their professional success. Today's agenda, and what we're going to be hearing more about, is we're going to start out with what are the importance of the AICPA blueprints and a little bit better understanding of those. Then we're going to talk about the evolved profession. So as the profession changes, so does the CPA exam as a result. The impact to the CPA exam specifically, we're going to go through the 4 parts of the CPA exam and the changes that you can expect to see. Then we're going to move on to how to really set a study schedule before, during, and after those July 1st changes. And then lastly, how to ensure a successful study strategy, again, in light of the July 1st changes, but then also beyond that for candidates studying for the CPA exam. Okay, so to get us started, let's start with a foundational understanding of what are the AICPA blueprints. So with the AICPA blueprints, what they are is they're really helping the candidate, and then more importantly, us at UWorld Roger CPA Review, truly understand what the students are going to be tested on come exam day. Now, the AICPA, so the folks that write the CPA exam, every few years solicit feedback from professors, candidates themselves, and then more importantly, the firms hiring the next generation of CPAs. They solicit the feedback to really make sure that what is being tested on the CPA exam appropriately reflects what is needed and the skills needed for the newly licensed CPA, so the first 2 years on the job. Feedback a few years ago was that the profession was evolving and changing, and in fact, the CPA exam was not appropriately reflecting what they needed as far as critical thinking skills of the first 2 years on the job. So the revision, and we now have the blueprints for a better understanding of that. So what you can see when you look at the blueprints is we see a representative task at hand. So this is really the problem at hand that our team, such as Dave, is going to be writing our high quality questions and answers for to ensure that you can really master that representative task. And then what you see on the screen is that there's 4 skill levels. So these 4 skill levels, again, are really testing the critical thinking skills. So we start at the bottom. So the basic understanding is remembering and understanding. Now on the CPA exam, if you see that representative task tested at the remembering and understanding level, you're going to see it reflected as a multiple choice question. Then above that, we go a little bit higher on the critical thinking skills. We get into application. So at the application level, that task can be tested as a multiple choice question or a task-based simulation. And then beyond that, a little higher, we're pushing those critical thinking skills up a little bit more. We've got the analysis level. If you see a representative task at the analysis level, guarantee it's going to be a task-based simulation. And then at the very top, so the highest of the order, critical thinking skills, is we have evaluation. Again, that of course is going to be tested as a task-based simulation. Now, good news is the only section of the 4 parts that tests or has TBS questions at the evaluation level for the time being is currently only audit. So again, do I expect everybody to be able to go through all these blueprints and understand and interpret them? No, that's really our job. More importantly, that's Dave and the content team's job to really make these come to life in a way that makes sense for you. So now that we know a little bit more about the actual blueprints and that kind of conceptual, I think we should start with really why we're here today, Dave. So we talked earlier that change is coming. As noted, as I just mentioned, the CPA exam is meant to reflect the skills needed of a newly licensed CPA within the first 2 years in the profession. Profession changes, so does the exam. It continues to evolve based on all of that feedback. So my question for you to get us started today is really, what is the driving force behind why we're seeing changes hit the CPA exam this July 1st?
That's a great question, Charlotte. So the exam is changing because what accountants are expected to do on the job is changing. They have to leverage complex technologies to do their jobs effectively. New technologies such as big data, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence have greatly impacted the accounting field, especially in 3 main areas. We have business processes, and those business processes have become more automated. So CPAs need to understand the business, including its operations, information systems, data flows, risks, and related internal controls. The automation of these business processes makes it important for CPAs to have greater IT knowledge. Also, one of the other main driving forces is that digital mindset and data analytics. Data analytics has allowed accountants to use new techniques and new data sources to do their jobs more effectively. Given the explosion of big data, it's important that newly licensed CPAs have an understanding of where and how to access data and how to use these new data sources in their jobs. Finally, what we see is an increased reliance on system and organizational controls for service organizations, internal controls over financial reporting, SOC 1 reports. Internal controls over financial reporting are frequently located in complex IT systems. Also, many organizations continue to outsource their IT to third parties and store more data in the cloud. These factors make it really important for CPAs to understand the impact of technology on internal controls at service organizations on a deeper level. And so as a result of these changes, the exam must also change to properly test these skills. This will primarily affect Audit and BEC, those two sections giving what's going on. Another way to look at it, there's two main ways that the CPA is evolving this year. The first way is that there's topics coming onto the exam and some topics moving off the exam. The second way to look at it is that there's some skill levels going up and then some skill levels going down.
Yeah, I bet candidates tuning in today, Dave, are probably excited to hear that there's some stuff coming off the CPA exam, right? You always have to make room for the new stuff coming on, so something has to go off. And we will definitely cover those here in a few minutes. But I think to start, it's safe to say that most are joining us with a little anxiety about what is coming onto the exam. So I'd love to start there first. From what we know, there is more content being added to the audit section, but I think focusing on where you just left us with BEC. So given the business process, as you mentioned, the explosion of the data flow, and given that impact, the digital transformation that's taking place because of that, I think it's best to start there. So why don't we go ahead and start with BEC and the changes and the updates that you're seeing for that section.
Okay, that's a great point. So there are three main areas where content has been added within BEC or BEC. The first is a combination of data-driven mindset, the SOC reports, and then the business process. The second major change that we see is focused on elements of SOC reporting. And then the third area focuses primarily on data management and relationships. And what I'd like to do now is take a look at these last three tasks a little bit more closely, is what we see right here: extracting, loading data, transforming, and data governance. And those three tasks, there is some relation there to ETL. And so ETL is something that is new to the exam, is fairly new to the exam, and I want to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So ETL stands for extract, transform, load, and some of you may have been exposed to ETL in either your accounting information systems courses or perhaps your data analytics courses, if you took one of those. Now, ETL is important for accountants because as analytics continues to impact the accounting profession, accountants are going to need to know how to extract, clean, standardize, and load data for further analysis. So for example, accountants may need to extract data from internal systems and external systems. These data may have different formats. They may have leading and trailing zeros, extra spaces, and so they'll need to be cleaned and standardized before that they can be analyzed. So once you've cleaned and standardized them, which would be the transform step of ETL, then what you could do is then load them into another target data source for further analysis. Now that target data source could be a data warehouse, it could be generalized audit software, or it could even be some statistical software. So the important thing to keep in mind with ETL is that for the exam, you need to know it at a conceptual level. You're not going to have to do ETL in a software package such as Microsoft Excel. But it is our job here at UWorld to get you ready to understand ETL at that conceptual level. So, and I'm sorry for the pun, so that you can excel on the CPA exam. But we've talked about ETL quite a bit now at a conceptual level and talked about what's coming onto the exam. I think what would be really good is to bring up an example question that we've been working on that relates to ETL. Now, this is a question actually that I had personally worked on myself. I've been very involved, and actually I wrote it, so I'm very happy to present it to you. And so let's go ahead and take a look at this because this does relate to ETL. So an organization is having difficulty moving data into an employee table in the target database. Now, each time a record is inserted into the employee table, another record is inserted into another table called employee audit log. This log table contains a record of all changes made to the employee table. Now, the update to the employee audit log is significantly slowing down the loading process. So the speed of the loading process may be improved by temporarily disabling which of the following. So this is a really cool question, okay, because it's testing, do you understand which things can affect the loading process, and then do you understand some of these specific IT related terms? And so what we would do with UWorld is the first thing that we would do is we would create an illustration that summarizes the question and also highlights the right answer. The next thing that we would do is identify the right answer, which in this case, maybe you know it, but if you don't, it's C, triggers. So we would identify the right answer as triggers, and then what we would do is go through and explain why trigger C is the right answer. So let me do that. Now, what a trigger is, it is a procedure that is executed when specific actions are made to the table's data. So in this case, what we're seeing is that each time a record is being added into the employee table, we're seeing another record added into the employee audit log table. Now, how does this slow down the load process? Well, it's probably fairly intuitive that you could see this because it's having to load into two tables. So it's going to do twice the work. So it will slow down that load process. Okay. So that's kind of the first part of our UWorld explanation, identifying and explaining the right answer. Then what we would do is go through and explain why A, B, and D are the wrong answers. And so let me do that. So referential integrity. So referential integrity is a requirement that a foreign key value match an existing value in a related table. And let me give you an example. So you could have an invoice table, and let's say you have a vendor table. Now in that invoice table, you have vendor ID, which is a primary key to vendor ID in the vendor table. Now what referential integrity says is that I can't have a vendor ID in the invoice table that does not exist in the vendor table. So basically what this is saying is that we can't have any invoices that are tied to a vendor that does not exist in the approved vendor table. So that's what referential integrity is. Now that's not really what's going on here. So that's not, that doesn't explain what's going on. But the thing is that referential integrity could still slow down the load process. Okay, let's look at B and D now. So B is saying unique constraints. And so let's talk about what a constraint is. A constraint is a rule that's applied to data and fields in a table. And so what a unique constraint means is that all data in the field have to be distinctive. When I worked in industry, for example, we had an employee table. And what we did is we made the employee number, which is an auto number, be the primary key. But we also had to store the employee social security number. What we did is we put a unique constraint on the employee SSN so that any new employee that was added to the table, we can ensure that that SSN was unique and distinctive. But again, while unique constraints could slow down the load process, what's going on here, the description in the scenario, the question stem, is a trigger. And then finally, the last one, mandatory fields. That's a little bit more intuitive. That's basically required field. So for example, you could say with the employee table, maybe employer hire date. The employee hire date would be an example of a mandatory field. And then if you didn't know the hire date and you tried to load that data into the employee table, it could bomb out on you. And then that could also slow the load process. Okay, so the last thing that we would do with our UWorld explanation is we would then summarize the key points of the question. We would say, here is the right answer, here's why it's the right answer, and then the key takeaway learning objectives from this question. And so that would be our overall process to explaining what's going on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you going over this question with us, Dave, especially because I know it's literally in production, right? That you wrote it. And so this is just, I know the schedule that you all are working on and the intensity and the passion that you're putting to rewriting a lot of our questions and drafting many of these new questions for these July 1st changes. So again, I knew we were in a treat since you were on those front lines writing a lot of these questions, really based on, again, business process and data as it's going to be changing on the CPA exam. So with that, on the concept of data, I am going to switch over into the audit section. So kind of continuing our discussion on data analytics and the impact that it's going to be having on the audit section specifically. So, you know, data analytics and that focus on it isn't really new, as you and I both know. We're starting to see more programs across the country are including data analytics courses, sometimes even having a master's in data analytics. So I guess my question for you is, isn't data analytics already being tested on the CPA exam? So what's really new this July?
That's a great question. So yes, the AICPA added audit data analytics to the exam a few years ago. So this isn't brand new on the audit side, but it is enhanced. They're just expecting more, and you're going to see more questions on the exam that are getting more in depth. You know, the way that the client manages their data is extremely important to auditors. Advancements in IT have led to an explosion of corporate data, big data and software that enables the auditor to mine that data to expose new insights. This explosion has resulted in the ability not just to use traditional data sources such as corporate relational databases and spreadsheets, but also new sources of data such as data from online sources. All of this data can, for example, be used in risk assessment procedures or in attested details. Now, if the auditor is to rely upon such data in their procedures, they need to know a thing or two about IT controls and data flows in order to determine whether that data that they're using is complete and accurate. Now, what we're seeing with regard to changes to audit, we're seeing these changes in three main areas: data analytics and automation. And so what we're seeing there is more in-depth focus on data analytics and automation within the audit function. And then we're also looking at some changes within internal controls. There's a greater focus on understanding the effect of key controls on reliability of data and also internal control documentation. And then finally, the impact of IT. We're looking at greater understanding and focus on the impact of IT on financial reporting and also using the work of an IT auditor. So there's so many changes coming to audit that we actually have 2 slides. And so if we look over here, we can start to see that, look, none of these on this first slide are even in under remembering and understanding. So they're looking for a greater in-depth understanding of the impact of IT on financial reporting and automation and analytics. And so you can see some of them are listed at the application level. Now, again, with audit, remember that audit is the only one that is at the evaluation level. And as we see on the next slide, where we can see that one of these is at the evaluation level right here, determining the sources of appropriate evidence and identifying procedures to validate the accuracy of data. So that means you're looking at a task-based simulation. Okay, so this is what we were talking about earlier. It's not new, but there is greater depth and a greater focus on these topics now. So now that we've talked a little about some of the changes to audit, and we've looked at some of the blueprints and the different different skill levels, let's go ahead and bring up an example question in our existing test bank that looks at audit data analytics.
Yeah, great. So before we unpack that question a little bit more, Dave, just so that our audience can know what we're looking at, actually, I've logged into my Elite Unlimited course here provided by UWorld Roger CPA Review. And there's a whole bunch that we have included in here for our learners. Again, that signature technology and the high quality content to ensure that they pass the CPA exam. So what we're going to look at is when we are in audit and we are in our question bank, and I'm in create test mode. So this is really where our students are practicing all of those great questions that you and your team have been writing. And within here, I'm going to go to a specific question. Again, I'm looking for one here that you're going to show us on audit data analytics. Let's go ahead and see the question. Now, before you take the time to explain it to us, Dave, I do want to point out for everyone watching today, immediately you can see we are truly in the testing environment. And so we're really trying to project an environment for our learners that mimics the AICPA testing experience within the Prometric Testing Center as close as we possibly can. So we see here, we've got our calculator, we've got access to Excel, amongst other features such as that clock continually reminding us as we're studying that time management is of essence. So just a little background about what we're looking at here today, and I'll turn it back to you, Dave, to explain to us this question.
Yeah, thanks so much, Charlotte, for giving that background there. So let's take a look at this question. So this is a good data analytics question, and it's saying once an auditor has planned an audit data analytic, the data must be accessed and prepared. So you can see right away from the question stem, this is cueing you into accessing and preparing data. Okay, so the preparation process may include which of the following procedures. And so we have A, B, C, and D, and when we show the correct answer, what we're going to see is that the right answer is D. Okay, now going through the UWorld explanation, this is what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about that example question on ETL from Beck. What we would do is we would show an image that highlights exactly what's going on so that you can get a mental picture in your head within 5 to 10 seconds. Then what we would do is explain the right answer. And we can see the right answer is D, which is merging data from different sources. And you can see the explanation. It's when we're talking about there is the AICPA suggested steps to audit data analytics, and the accessing and preparing is step 2. You can see that's what's discussed right there in the explanation. Now, we go into further detail to explain a little bit more by what we mean by accessing and preparing the data. And here's our old friend that we just talked about, ETL, extract, transform, load. And so in the transform phase, what you would do is you would be pulling data from a couple different sources, cleaning that data, and part of that cleaning, standardizing, and structuring that data, part of that transform process could be joining data sets from different sources and merging that data into one combined data source that you could then load into other software for further analysis. So that's why D is the right answer. And so you can see our process, we explain the right answer, and then we can see down there with choices A, B, and C, we explain why those are the wrong answers. And then the other thing, you might see that little blue that's highlighted over sorting right there. So let's go ahead and click that. That's another feature that we have in our software where we can include a hyperlink. If we think that there's another image that can convey the point to you, another illustration, what we'll do is we'll create a hyperlink, and then you can click on that hyperlink. In this case, it's discussing sorting, and then it gives you another good visual mental image that you can take away from looking at this question. And then what we would do is then conclude by what I was talking about earlier, the things to remember, those summary key points that we want you to take away from this question. What are the key learning objectives that we want you to take with, and that you can put onto a flashcard for further study?
Yes, thank you for explaining that, Dave. In addition to what everyone's seeing here, you'll also see quickly, again, for the purposes of time today, everything is also connected within the course. And so we also have a link right here to one of our lecture videos taught by Roger Phillips, CPA CGMA. Again, also providing a little bit more explanation on this particular topic that this question relates to. In addition to what Dave had mentioned, the flashcards, which are also available on our digital mobile app. So again, everything just really interwoven and connected together in order to ensure that our students are truly understanding the material. So thank you for taking us through that audit question, Dave. Now, as we jump back into the remaining 2 parts of the CPA exam, so we know a little bit more about BEC and audit, rightfully so, they're getting kind of the greatest impact this year. You know, it would be great to kind of shift our attention over to FAR and REG. We don't want to leave them out. Even though the changes aren't as significant, what's happening to each of them is still important. So I'm going to go ahead and shift us back over. Let's start with FAR, Dave. So rumor has it, what we're seeing on the blueprints is that FAR, a biggie, is going off the CPA exam. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is a true statement. So yes, with FAR, what we're looking at is more coming off the exam, IFRS. So about a decade ago, there are a lot of predictions that IFRS would become widely adopted within the United States because US corporations own a lot of foreign subsidiaries and vice versa. However, these predictions didn't come true. So newly licensed CPAs just aren't coming across it like they thought they would.
Yeah, so I mean, that's really the biggie that we're hearing for it. You know, as mentioned, we thought it would have much more of adoption, and it's not making sense. And as new things are coming onto the exam, it's time to evolve some of the things and take them off the exam as well. So then let's go ahead and switch gears over then to, we'll wrap it all up with the 4 parts with REG. You know, REG really seemed to be all the talk in 2019. I remember we were educating students and professionals and professors on all of the CPA exam changes to REG, really with all the tax law changes and overhaul. So I think it's gone through enough change the past 2 years. It gets a little bit of a break this year, but yet it's still evolving. So I was hoping you might help us understand a little bit about the changes that are happening to REG come July.
Yeah, so some topics such as federal securities law, estate tax, and AMT are being removed, but otherwise reg is seeing the least amount of impact with some topics being de-emphasized. Now, I wouldn't get too excited. You're still gonna have to know these. It's just that the questions you see on the exam won't be as difficult. Let's take bankruptcy, for example. Bankruptcy will continue to be tested, but the exam will no longer include application level questions that present a scenario in which you'll need to know how to apply the rules. If you see a bankruptcy question on the exam, it will be at the remembering and understanding level. So what that basically means is that you need to know enough to recognize the rules, but not apply them.
Mhm. Yeah, and as you mentioned, as we both been mentioning earlier today, that skill level being reduced to what I'm seeing here is on the screen is 3 of the 4 are going down to remembering and understanding, which again, at the end of the day is going to be a multiple choice question for students preparing for the CPA exam. So, well, good. Well, I'm glad that we were able to also touch on FAR and REG, not leave them out by any means. So now that we have a better understanding of the impact of the changes to all 4 sections of the CPA exam, I'm confident that our group watching is feeling more confident with a deeper understanding, first and foremost, of what are the blueprints and then how are they changing within each of the 4 parts. But now that we know what the changes are, I'm curious if you suggest that students adjust their study plan as a result of these changes, knowing they're coming July 1st. So for example, typically, Dave, when I'm presenting to students or a group of interns within a firm, we usually are recommending that you start with financial first, and then from there, audit or reg, and then the third, audit or reg, and then lastly, bring it home with BEC as the 4th and final part. However, given the changes that you've mentioned, would you actually recommend perhaps a different path for a candidate studying right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Charlotte. So you're correct. FAR is usually recommended to take first. While this is the typical recommendation due to the breadth of coverage, it's certainly not mandatory. But with the changes this year, if IT makes you nervous, you may want to get Audit and BEC out of the way now. So if you haven't sat for any of the exams and you're trying to navigate around all these changes, the most logical order would be to get BEC out of the way first, then Audit, then FAR, then Reg. So with BEC, you get your management perspective, then Audit is a layer on top of that, and there's a lot of overlap between FAR and Audit. And then Reg, you can safely wait until the end, but it really does depend upon the person. If, for example, you work in audit and that's a comfortable subject for you, then go ahead and take Audit first. Get some experience with the exam and gain some confidence, and then sit for the rest of those other sections. If you recently graduated, IT may not be a big issue for you, but if you're going to be taking part of the exam prior to July 1st, you may want to pick Audit or BEC because they're experiencing the most changes to start your 18-month clock running, and then save FAR and Reg for after July 1st, so you can take advantage of the content reductions in those sections. Again, this is an unusual year given these July 1st changes.
Yes, it is an unusual year. I will say, given all of our experience, it's not like we've never seen changes happen before. So we're well versed on how to really ensure our students have success throughout those changes. Very much like the information you shared today, but then also that advice. So, I agree, this is a suggested order, really, but I do want to mention for anyone watching today, I am going to include my contact information at the end of this presentation, and I welcome you to email or call me, and we can schedule a complimentary one-on-one advising session where maybe we, unpack your particular situation, your study schedule, help understand maybe a little bit of the angst that you might be having with each of the 4 parts, and really determine the best path moving forward for you based on your own suggested study order. So with that, my last question for you, Dave, is we understand the 4 parts and the changes. Maybe you want to shift around our study schedule a little bit. My last question for you is, given all of these changes, should candidates prepare for the CPA exam differently this year than they have in the past?
Another good question, Charlotte. So I would say an absolute yes. As I've shared today, the exam has evolved significantly over the years. And as a result, the way that the students study for the CPA exam has also faced the need to evolve. You know, the days of spending hours and going to live classes, etc., has significantly changed. Students today and their expectations of what they experience throughout their studies, particularly in a CPA review course, have also changed. And we're excited to be leading that change, innovating in the way that students learn. You know, the focus for today's students needs to be on A, quality, and B, the technology, the platform that students learn in. You know, as a member of the content team, I can speak to the passion that we give to writing the highest quality questions in the course. And, you know, I've seen some other review questions and explanations from other review providers. And, well, I may be biased, but I believe our questions and our explanations are superior. You know, other providers they don't provide a comprehensive illustration from what I've seen. Our explanations also go into great depth due to our question review process. And let me talk for a second about our question review process. You know, I'll speak to the faculty here for a second. I've been through review processes for papers, for publishing papers, and this is similar. And so I've been given a lot of suggestions, and I've had to take those to heart and have a tough skin, but it's made me a better content writer. And you know what, for you as a student, what that means is that the quality of the questions that you're gonna see are the highest quality. So I've shared my quality, I've shared my passion here as a content writer, but I also want to emphasize our fantastic technology and our platform as well. So with that, Charlotte, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yes, Dave. So definitely, you know, here at UWorld Roger CPA Review, we are truly changing the way that students study and succeed on the CPA exam. So mentioning what you had mentioned already, Dave, here with our active learning methodology. So our active learning methodology really is how we approach our program, where the students in our course are going to learn by doing. You're truly going to understand the concepts as you work through those questions and answers. And then they're also complemented with our extraordinary instruction. So Roger Phillips CPA CGMA lectures, really breaking down some of the most difficult exam topics and teaching them in a way that you'll not only better comprehend, but it's going to minimize your reliance on memorization as you're studying for the CPA exam. You'll also see here, we mentioned our signature technology. So I hinted at this earlier. Really with our signature technology, what you're going to see is two main areas. We've got our SmartPath predictive technology and spaced repetition within our digital flashcards. Starting with SmartPath predictive technology, that is a data-driven path of all the students that have come before our current test takers, candidates in our course. And what were the specific targets that they hit, the scores that they were getting, and the number of questions that they had been working through within the question bank. We've basically taken that, mined that data, and we provide our students a path towards success where you're going to pass 3 times faster. Again, much to attributing to our 91% CPA exam pass rate. In addition, I mentioned our spaced repetition technology. That is found specifically in our digital flashcards. So with our students, for example, in our Elite Unlimited course, you're going to have flashcards with you on the mobile app, always on the go, and you'll be able to interact via spaced repetition. Basically with spaced repetition, very similar to SmartPath, it's going to eliminate the need to cram and to memorize, but you're going to have reassurance that come exam day, you're actually truly understanding and then applying everything that you've learned. We have flexible course access time, so easy ways to renew your course access, but more importantly, with our Elite Unlimited course, students have lifetime access, so it's never going to expire as you're studying for the exam. And then lastly, as I mentioned, everything is available and more what you saw from Dave and I today on our fully featured mobile app. So your digital flashcards, your lecture videos, multiple choice questions, task-based simulations, all of that available, and our ebook all on the mobile app. So really everyone can maximize every minute as a study minute in order as they're working towards passing the CPA exam. Now, lastly, I did mention I welcome anyone that joined us today to contact me directly. I would love to answer any questions that you may have about our course and our experience, and also to be able to schedule some of those one-on-one advising sessions. With that, I do feel I would like to say thank you on behalf of Dave and I for joining us today. It's been a privilege being here. Dave, thank you for all the great information and the 2 questions that you walked us through. We look forward to helping all of our students pass the CPA exam, not only this year, but well into the future. And thank you for your time today.